Oh, there go Dad. Hey, Daddy. Peace, Daddy. Should I say that? Let me put this on the promo right quick. Just went live. What's up, y'all? What's up? What's up? Hold up. Went live. What's up, Joy Boy? King Lee? FBA Nigel? Okay. Kid Gravity. What's up, Kid Gravity? All right, so as you can see from the title, y'all know what's going on. We are talking about the public school system. We switching it up. Okay, this is probably the most different show I've done so far. Jazz Jade in the building. What's up, Jazz Jade? Shout out to the Patreon members who sent in questions. Jazz Jade, peacefully rounded. We're gonna get to those at the end. But today we ain't even gotta waste no time because my guest on time today. She on time today. It's a blessing. Okay, I know our last couple shows, they was a little late. You know, they had us waiting. I had to stall y'all for about good 5-10 minutes, but today we on time. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring Shorty in right quick because y'all already know who it is. We already know who it is. Hey, sis.
Peace. How are you? How are you?
I am great. How are you?
Listen, it is refreshing. First of all, thank you for bringing me on. Secondly, shout out to the DMV because we don't get enough shine. We don't get enough credit. You know what I'm saying? For all of the good work that we put in down here because, we be unapologetically Black in the DMV. So it's an honor to see you, sister, just really representing us well all the time. And I'm so inspired by your work and I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, girl. I can say the same. I am going to say the same thing. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I've been watching you for a minute. For a minute now. I'm a big fan for sure. I've been fangirling for a little minute now. So, and I love to see you from DC. You putting in that work. Okay, it's a blessing. You be one, you be on code. And yeah, I love it. I love the work you do. It's a blessing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I got to say, assalamu alaikum. My father told me to greet you with assalamu alaikum. He's in the chat.
Yes, tell your pops I said hello.
I'm sure he see you. He up in this joint. And my sister, what's up, Queen? Peace and many blessings, supply more truth to the world. Thank you, Queen. We up in this joint. We about to get into it. Okay. 5. Shout out to 5. You know 5 2 to 5. The red pill.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he in DC. Native too. It's a blessing.
Yeah, that's my brother. You know all about what goes down in my classes. Shh, don't tell nobody.
All right, let's get into it. So first things first, you are from DC. You were born and raised in DC, correct?
Born and raised in DC, Northwest DC.
Northwest?
Yep.
Did you go to public schools in DC?
Yep, my entire life. I went to Harriet Tubman Elementary School. I went to Paul Middle School right before, like when they were talking about making it into a charter. That was a long time ago. And then I'm a proud graduate of Benjamin Banneker Academic College Preparatory Senior High School, Banneker.
Oh, okay. And wait, hold on, I skipped over this. My bad. Let me introduce yourself. Let me let you introduce yourself too. I'm rushing. Go ahead, introduce yourself right quick.
Hey, y'all. I'm Jade Harrell Arundel, aka Lioness Crowned. I am an educator, a student of life, a national organizer. My background is in education. I taught high school, grades 9 through 12 for about 11 years, and now serve as an educational consultant. I'm also a proud member of the National Black United Front, where I hold a national office. I am the National Vice Chair of Administration for our 42 plus year old independent grassroots Black liberation organization, and also a proud contributor on Fly Nubian Queen Network. So y'all can catch me in the Lioness Den weekdays at 12 p.m. Eastern time at flynubianqueentv.com.
Yes, ma'am. Shout out to Fly Nubian Queen. We love to see it. And I'm glad you already said that too. You taught 9 through 12 because I was going to ask you that. Okay. But right quick, just going back to your foundation. Okay, so you grew up in public. You went through the public school system in DC. Um, Now, how was it? Because you are very old code. You're very B1, pro-black, and I love to see it. Now, but where did that influence stem from? Did you have that, were you taught like any real black history, or did you have any teachers influence you throughout your school growing up?
Absolutely. I would say the first, semblance of education is definitely from the home. I come from a long line of educators. I think I'm like the fifth generation college student, college graduate. On one line of my family tree, yes, I'm from foundational Black American. And I am probably like a fifth generation educator as well on that same line. So we went into education and we really did a lot of organizing in my bloodline. In terms of my formal education, the teachers at my elementary school were also, they were students and organizers from the civil rights movement. A lot of the Black teachers that we had back then, they went through the DC District of Columbia Teachers College at the time, but they were also like organizers within SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the SCLC, and other Black organizations doing civil rights work, and they were educators. And so all of that foundational history was taught in our school. We did Lift Every Voice and Sing, and we learned poems that were empowering, but we had a really, really strong curriculum, and everything was Black first. It was centered around our culture because we had teachers who were in the classroom for like 40, 50 years, literally, and had done work in the community. And so our teachers went to church. When we went to church, they lived where we lived. They knew our families. They could beat us. You know what I'm saying? We acted up in school. It was like that close-knit community. So it wasn't just about the educational foundation, but also the cultural and ethical and moral foundation was laid very, very heavy in my formative years in school.
Oh, okay, that's a blessing. Okay, I love to hear that. Do you think that's a big part of? You said you're a fifth. You're like a fifth generation educator as well, correct? So is that why you became a teacher? Did you already like, was that always your goal was to become a teacher?
Education, yeah, it chose me. It chose me. I knew that I was going to do Black studies when I was a high school student. I knew that I wanted to do education reform and policy work and really focusing on Black liberation and Black studies. And so, I decided, I knew early on that I was going to be a teacher, but I also knew I was going to do different things too. I knew I was going to be a journalist. Like I was, interviewing people in elementary school. I knew I was going to do human rights work. I had fellowships, doing human rights work and working with different organizations and Pan-Africanist organizations and fellowships and all of that kind of stuff. I had a whole career, as I was growing up outside of school. And so it just naturally led me into education. But I tell people, like, I didn't choose my purpose. I didn't choose this work. This work chose me. I inherited this work from my ancestors.
Connected. Now I feel a spirit. So now that's a blessing. Well, why do you think you chose to do public schooling specifically, to teach in public schools? Why not private schools, charter, something like that?
So, I mean, people say that, oh, charter schools are public schools. Yeah, but and no. I did work in charter. I did work in public. I wanted to be anywhere where Black folks is going to be at. Where Black children are, I need to be there. Where Black teachers are, even if in the minority, I need to be there. I specifically worked in charter school education because of the amount of resources that they had. One, two, how they tend to gentrify school communities, school buildings, communities, right? And because they're not as regulated. And so I was really drawn to the fact, like, oh, charter schools aren't that regulated. So they can make teachers work all these hours or have all of these policies that nobody's pushing up against. There aren't many Black educators in the charter school world when you're talking about larger charter management organizations. I want to be over there. I want to be over there producing justice. I want to be over there seeing what they're doing to children and how they're supporting or not supporting our children, Black children and educators. And how can I, sort of hold folks accountable? And that's exactly what I did.
Okay. That's a blessing. Okay. Well, I can imagine even going to public schools because although there may have been, even in DC, there's a lot of Black teachers. we're not making the curriculums in that sense. So did you find it challenging to, still want to teach knowledge of self and, real Black history with, did you find that challenging having to balance that with what the school was telling you to teach the children?
Because I know our history so well, and because my content areas were, my main content area was English. So within the English, as long as we're teaching the skills that they can be assessed on, like how to, write an essay, how to do, certain, skills-based things within English, I pretty much had a lot of flexibility in terms of curriculum. So I had them reading like Black Boy by Richard Wright. I had them reading books that were rooted in our culture. And I was teaching them the skills and still aligning to like the core curriculum, stuff and things according to the New York State Board of Regents, for example. So I found a lot of flexibility within that. Now, if I taught, and then also I worked on like diversity and inclusion initiatives, within school communities at the same time, like while I was teaching. And so like teaching our culture across the curriculum, and really supporting other educators in doing that. But the beauty of working in, I guess you could say like the humanities or the liberal arts within K through 12 is that you can take a particular book that's rooted in our culture and really, teach them cultural things and historical facts and still teach in a way that sets them up for success for standardized testing.
Did you find any sort of pushback, maybe from like non-Black children or non-Black children's parents, anything like that, or even Black children's parents?
A lot from Black children's parents, interestingly. I haven't taught many non-Black kids. I mean, even like the Latinx or Latino Hispanic communities within the schools that I worked in were in the minority. They were in the minority.
Okay. Well, what sort of pushback were you getting from Black children or Black children's parents, should I say?
We don't see race. Color isn't a thing.
Egregious.
A lot of that from a lot of children's parents who were first or second generation immigrants over here. A lot of the students, or some of the students were cool. Some of the parents actually were on code as well in terms of knowing that racism was the issue and white supremacy actually existed. But then there were many who were very, very religious, really, really indoctrinated into the church, and then also heavily colonized. And we're just kind of like, I'm not sending my kid to school to learn about that Black stuff. Well, we're going to learn about that Black stuff today in my class. And so like that was not a non-negotiable. But there were certain things I think that some school leaders tried to push the line on that, parents were like, this is inappropriate. Like, for instance, I once taught a student who was a Jehovah's Witness, and the book that was being taught was the Poisonwood Bible. I wasn't teaching that book. Another teacher was, did I teach that book? I think I did teach that book. Because it was on a preset curriculum, and the parent was like, listen, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. We're not sending my kid to school to learn. I don't care if this is mandated. Find something else for her to read. So the white male principal at the time was like, Jade, you have to convince, this parent that like, we know what's best. And, everyone's going to read this book. I'm like, nope, we're absolutely not going to do that. I'm going to find her another book to read. So I do, on the flip side, like while there were some parents who were off code culturally, there were other parents who were on code and were calling out the fact that some folks within the charter school world just sort of had this really elitist, paternalistic approach to Black children and blatant disrespect and disenfranchisement of the Black parent, which is a problem. So when it got down to it, am I here for my job and my role and my salary or whatever as a Black educator, or am I here to do the work? Am I advocating for the family, the parent, and Black folks? I always chose the latter, and that's just what it was. It was just like non-negotiable.
Okay, well, that's something I love to hear though, is that at least you did get that. But did you notice that in a lot of Black families? Did you notice like the push for Black history or knowledge of self in a lot of Black families specifically? Like, were the kids coming to school like, oh, my father told me about this, or I heard about this? But did you get that a lot as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in DC, I definitely got a lot of that because, I had a lot of, socially conscious parents. DC the DMV is a politically, it's a Black conscious space. So I found that a lot. I also found a lot of conscious students, especially also in Brooklyn when I was teaching in Brooklyn, New York. And so, yeah, there was a lot of it. A lot of children, just the older they get, they feel like there's so much that they don't know, and they feel robbed when they feel like they're coming to school to learn about the world, and it's not really culturally responsive to them. And so I found, my students found a lot of support in knowing that, like, we got you. We going to work through it, and we're gonna, even if something as simple as current events happening and taking place. When Ferguson was taking place, and all these different, we were looking at it from a historical, a political, cultural lens that they weren't getting, other places in school. But students will ask, but it's all about what the administrators and what the schools prioritize, and usually it's just they prioritize bullshit over actual Black empowerment. But it's up to us as Black educators to provide that and bridge that gap.
Okay. And I'm glad you said that, because growing up, and I went to a Muslim school in MUI in DC, actually, when I was from when I stopped going, I think like third grade or something like that. And the difference in there and then switching to a public school, especially going to the South, I mean, culturally, it was definitely a culture shock, you know what I'm saying? Because it was completely different. One, I went from all Black teachers to damn near all white teachers. I only had one Black teacher. I think my sister had one Black teacher. So it was definitely a big change in setting. But I will say for the Black teachers that I did have, Black women in particular, they were some of the best teachers I had. Very empathetic, the most understanding. So how important do you think, or essential do you think for Black children to have, I'm gonna get into male teachers in a second, but even just Black teachers in general, in your position as a Black woman, how do you think you affected the development of some of these children, Black children growing up?
Thanks. I think to answer your question, it's imperative that Black children have Black teachers. I didn't have a white teacher until I got into, I kind of want to say the 8th or the 9th grade. And I probably only had one white teacher at that point. So that's different. That it hits different when you go to school from pre-K, and then by the time you get into your adolescent teenage years, that's when you first have a white teacher. So I think it's imperative. I think that for me, I worked in an environment where there were only a couple. When I say a couple, I was like one of 2 or 3 Black content teachers. Everybody else was like the gym teacher or dean of students or whatever, if you were Black. So it's important that they see us, and also in leadership roles within education. But I find that it's even more important that we have a larger Black female representation. And so it wasn't really until I got into the charter school teaching world, that's when I really noticed a disparity in the agenda to make sure not just the school to prison pipeline for Black boys, but a concerted effort, in my opinion, to withhold prestigious content teaching and leadership positions to heterosexual Black men, period. So we need more of that everywhere, from pre-K all the way to the 12th grade.
Thanks. And how about Black male teachers? Because Black teachers, male teachers are a smaller percentage, smaller percentage than female teachers in general. But Black male teachers is even further into the minority. So how essential do you think Black male teachers, especially without Black boys, how much do you think that affects their development in the public school system?
It definitely affects their social emotional development. So some of the work that I do as an anti-racism trainer and consultant within schools around the country is that I notice the unconscious racial bias that white teachers have towards Black boys, namely white women, white female teachers. And so, there's no reason why, a teacher is complaining that a kindergartner allegedly sexually harassed her or was aggressive and made her feel threatened. You know what I'm saying? And so, and then they get sent out of class and punished and chastised and shamed, more often by these teachers, white females, usually, who have this deep-rooted hatred and anti-Black bias towards young Black boys. And so when Black boys are in school environments where they have teachers who are also Black men, who are nurturing them, who don't see them as threatening, who are more patient with them, who can sort of relate to their cognitive and social emotional development, who can relate to, their family structures or just other all of the isms and all of the stuff surrounding growing up and trying to figure yourself out and live life and be a child as a Black boy who's growing into a Black man, that is very affirming for, Black boys and young Black men, young Black scholars in schools. And so for that reason, I believe we have an absence and a concerted effort to withhold heterosexual Black men from teaching positions and positions of leadership that could potentially extend an olive branch to and inspire and motivate Black boys.
That's not surprising. That is not surprising because the black male teachers I have, I can't even think of no Black male teachers I had that I didn't even like. To be honest, all of my Black male teachers were like that. Like, they were very inspirational. They were very close to the young men around me, and the other my peers and students. But what about I'm curious about the flip side of that, because I also have had, and especially when it comes to Black female teachers, I've had some really mean ass teachers, for no damn reason, just be doing the damn most. Okay. So have you noticed that on the flip side of that, have you noticed any self-hatred being projected into children?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I talk to educators about and hold them accountable for and support them with getting out of is with Black teachers. When people talk about anti-racism and things and racism in schools, they usually thinking about it like from a Black-white issue. Well, we've internalized a lot of anti-Black hatred and racism ourselves. And so what that looks like in the classroom from a Black teacher, oftentimes Black female teachers, some of them who may have some biases or some daddy issues or not like the Black male species. That's a whole nother conversation. But, oftentimes, Black educators are prone to enforcing a level of stereotype threat. We call it stereotype threat, which is the Black teacher may feel that they're preparing the Black child for the real world by teaching them to assimilate, conform, and submit to racism, right? It looks like respectability politics. Don't be all loud. You know what I'm saying? Sit down. Don't wear a hoodie. Don't be talking slang. If you speak like that, you might get pulled over or, profiled in the store or pulled over by the police. And so in the mind of the Black educator who is prone to do this, they really feel like they're afraid of what could potentially happen to the child. And so that they feel like they are being harder on the Black student than other students because they want them to be safe in the world. But what that actually do is it produces and projects a level of internalized racial oppression and racial inferiority when we do that. And so that happens when the Black educator hasn't done their work, when that Black educator isn't unapologetically Black or doesn't have a level of cultural competency and Black power empowerment, then they feel the need to sort of, teach, like prep children for massa, right? Just sort of be agreeable, be docile, just fall in line, speak this way, dress this way, and you'll be safe in the world. Like, you're not going to get pulled over or stopped. If you just work hard enough and act like a good Negro, then you're going to be safe. And clearly everything that's happening right now in the world, and studies will show you that it don't matter if you have on a suit, if you speak the Queen's English, your Black ass is liable to get caught up in this global prison system of racism and white supremacy. And so we need Black educators to understand that. And we need those educators to also understand what white supremacy is and really empower our children to produce justice and practice counter warfare in all of the 9 areas of people activity.
I love that. And what about, was there any friction? Now, you did say you worked with predominantly Black in predominantly Black schools, but did you have any white teachers or non-Black teachers there? Was there any friction there with those teachers when it comes to teaching Black kids knowledge of self, or not being the passive Negro, not teaching them that self-hate?
It's interesting because some of the white teachers, a few of them were a bit more open and understanding and sometimes a bit more patient than some Black teachers that I have encountered. Why? is usually because there's fewer Black teachers than white teachers, and oftentimes the ones who get promoted or who, you know, work in these predominantly white environments have done a whole bunch of conforming themselves, right? And then some white, you know, teachers or non-white teachers, I mean non-Black teachers, just are just sort of there teaching and focusing on content. So, I mean, I've seen a mix of both, but I also have seen quite a number of non-Black teachers lack social and cultural etiquette when it comes on to Black culture. What that looks like is trying to emulate the way we speak, or trying to, you know, find a way to pseudo connect with Black children in a way that produces like macroaggressions, that reproduces harm. And, you know, subconsciously, consciously they think that they're trying to relate and they're being liberal and a good white person or a good white teacher, but in fact, they're actually reproducing racism.
Yeah, Malcolm X said it himself. You gotta watch them damn liberals. They be the worst. Now let me switch gears for a second though, because something I noticed a lot and growing up in schools is something I didn't really I didn't understand until coming out of school. But there was always what seemed like, I don't want to use offensive language, but students that will be in my class, you know, maybe 1 year, especially when I got to high school, they'll be in my class 1 year, like in, you know, just general classes. And then for some reason, after that year or a couple years of school, you know, a couple semesters, something happens and they end up in remedial classes, especially when it comes to Black boys. But do you think that is a systematic effort towards, because I mean, these were what seemingly seemed like regular ass Black boys and girls, you know, like I said, I had classes with some of these kids, and then next thing you know, they end up in remedial classes. Do you think this is something that's systematically done?
Yes. So I think that, well, first of all, and every parent should hear this. Children do not learn from people they don't like. Children do not learn from people that they do not like, and children also do not learn from people that they perceive as not liking them. So even if they have a Black teacher or someone who looks like them, they perceive like, oh, this teacher don't like me, then they shut down. That's just a fact. The other thing too is, and this is what my teacher, Dr. Joy DeGroot, who wrote Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, this is where her work comes in. She's created a respect index for Black boys in schools. Respect is so important in our culture, and it's so important, you know, to Black boys, and, you know, in particular, that if a child feels disrespected, they'll also shut down and not learn. And so those social nuances often get misconstrued, and then the Black child or student or scholar is then condemned as having a behavioral issue, is then out of class, loses lots of learning time, is oftentimes embarrassed in the classroom or embarrassed by virtue of not being there, and then falls behind. And then it sort of creates this domino effect chain reaction where, you know, they're put in remedial classes based off of the seed of what usually happens is usually based off of them not being compliant, not wanting to, be controlled or being disrespected or condescended to. So our children within our culture, they do not learn well that way. And so instead of that being addressed and remedied, we have them, they're put in remedial classes. They're given an IEP. They're told that they're not as intelligent, or they have a learning gap. And that's actually oftentimes not what the case is. The case is usually some sort of social ill or unconscious racial bias and stereotyping for Black boys in particular that sort of makes them feel like outsiders. And so if you feel like an outsider in the classroom or in your school community, how the hell are you supposed to learn?
Right. And especially for Black boys, because and I'm glad you brought up the point about behavioral issues, because that was from what I seen one of the main reasons why they were in those sorts of classes. But actually I kind of want to expand on that too, because a lot of the times with the behavioral issues, it's a masculine energy, that they're trying. It's almost like buck breaking, in a systematic way through school systems. Have you noticed that too, that some of these kids are just maybe have like an alpha energy, or just have that masculine energy to try to assert themselves, and they're not guided, especially if they don't have fathers at home or male figures at home. And so it comes out in, maybe not the most healthiest or productive ways in school, but it's still like not shaped. It's just counted out as bad or toxic. And this is what everybody like to use now.
Yes. So there, if you're, listen, this is why the world is crazy right now, and schools are out of control. When there's this falsehood that is being taught in society, right, and it trickles over into schools where people believe that masculinity is bad, and that masculinity on a Black child or a Black male person, a Black boy, is toxic, right? And so what it does internally to the child is it's forcing them through being punished all the time and hearing things like, the future is female and all of this sort of anti-male rhetoric. It internalizes to them that like something's wrong with me because I'm Black, and something's wrong with me because I'm a dominant male, and I express myself, I advocate for myself, and I won't be disrespected, I won't be controlled. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just doing age appropriate stuff. Well, every time I'm just being me, I'm getting in trouble anyway. So let me just go ahead and stop doing those things. Let me stop advocating for myself. Let me stop being loud. Let me just stop being myself and conform to this new idea of what masculinity is supposed to look like, or what boys or men are supposed to be. And so I find that is happening. Now, in terms of like data, disciplinary data that comes out of schools in terms of send outs, in-school suspensions, and out-of-school suspensions, we see that Black boys who are dominant and displaying proudly their masculinity are punished more frequently and more severely than their non-male Black counterparts. That is a problem, and that is the agenda.
Yeah, that's definitely a form of buck breaking. That's sad. Our young brothers got to go through that. But I want to get into the girls too, because girls are seeming, well, let me say this first, because the way that school systems are set up, public schools more specifically, the way that they're set up, in general, it seems like it's more catered to a feminine style of learning, sitting in one place for one time at long periods of time, stretched out, having to sit there and listen. So do you think to an extent that girls are sort of privileged or protected inside school systems because they are, that is, it kind of caters to their way of thinking?
I think it does in many ways. It caters to their way of thinking. And I also do believe that there's also a concerted effort to push very assertive, strong-minded Black girls out of the classroom as well. And we're seeing an increasing uptick in data and like girl push out, like school push out, for Black girls. And that usually happens so the Black girl who is sort of quiet, does her work, doesn't talk back, makes her white female teacher feel comfortable and is friendly with them, she will go further than the Black girl who is just going to be like, okay, don't like the way you did that, I'm not going to do that, this is inconsistent, yada, yada, yada. Like, that Black girl is going to get punished. And what we see is a lot of body shaming of Black girls. Yeah. You've noticed that too, right, Zeze?
Yeah, I was going to get into that next. I'm glad you're doing it. Go ahead.
Yeah, body shaming. So, our figures develop pretty, early, or whatever. Our body shapes are different. And so often you see a lot of girls being sent out of class, told that their clothing is inappropriate. Even like their school uniform. It's like, hey, I'm wearing the same thing that so-and-so is wearing. Like, why are you sending me out of class? This is how my body is shaped, right? Also with hair. Extensions or hair, or just, we like to do a whole, we like to pop and look good. And so that they also, find ways to create dress code policies and hair policies and nail policies and makeup policies and things to add to this sort of like internalized inferiority around Black aesthetics, the way our body is shaped, the way, we show up in the world in our beauty. That is an issue, like, right? So why am I being punished that like I'm not shaped like Sarah? You know what I'm saying? So, I think that there are other more insidious and sort of like covert psychological methods that are at play against Black girls. But I would say that the targeting and the methods that are happening towards Black boys in the schools and the classrooms, they're more overt and more aggressive.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that. Well, do you think that because I know going through schools, and you kind of made a point of this already. I wasn't the most, I did have that foundation from the NUI, you know what I'm saying? And my father instilled a lot of knowledge of self-fulfillment at a very young age. So when I got to public schools, I found myself getting into it with teachers all the time. Like, I'm not living, this ain't right. Especially when we got into stuff about, like, when I took world religions in high school, it was like, you about to teach me about some shit I already know, about Islam, and then everything wasn't accurate. So there was a big tug and pull of power between me and a lot of my teachers. Do you think that Black women in particular, or Black girls in particular, although it is an effort to kind of push us to be the heads of households, and because they're trying to break down the Black family, and they want to promote us being the leaders over our men, do you think also along with that we're also kind of taught to have to tame ourselves, you know what I'm saying, to kind of like basically lie to ourselves to get approval from some of these teachers?
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, you need those teachers that like you, right? So there's a pressure on that front from the student, the Black student. I need my teacher to like me. If they don't like me, I'm gonna get sent out of class or whatever. So let me just go ahead and be likable, right? Mm-hmm. Turn on this part of my personality, or turn down this part of my personality. At the end of the day, I need to feel comfortable coming to my teacher to ask questions when I'm confused, or if I don't know something, or if I need something. So there's a pressure there. And so I think that plays a factor in them monitoring and shifting their behavior. And when you get into the older grades, like, hey, I need this teacher to write a recommendation for me so I can get to college, get a job, do this fellowship, do this scholarship to make some money. And so if I am not accepted by my teachers, then I am not going to make it to college. And honestly, college is being taught very, very oppressively. It's being shoved down the throats of Black children very aggressively and very strategically, because it's like, okay, if you don't go to and through college, then you will be a loser. You're going to go to jail. You're already an at-risk youth. Yeah. Like, so there's so much pressure around that. But what happens in college? Like, colleges are think tanks, but they're also pressure cookers to get young adults groomed into being adults that will go out into the workforce to go work for Becky and Brad, for the most part, to go out and work for somebody else oftentimes, but it's not necessarily a place of empowerment. But other forms of empowerment of like entrepreneurship, vocational education, the trades, etc., those options are not available for our Black children. And so I say all this to say is that the internal pressure that children feel, they feel it because they need to conform and have their teachers to like them to get these recommendations so they can get into, oftentimes a predominantly white college or institution in order to be successful, right? Or be somebody, pull themselves up by their bootstraps. All of this stuff is predicated upon white supremacy, culture, white cultural norms, a whole bunch of lies and deception and things to keep Black children who grow up into Black adults to be disempowered and to serve the white dominant power structure. But people like my sister Zeze here and me, we are here to shift the paradigm and to really empower Black children and to empower Black educators to shift the narrative, because no longer are we going to send our children away to school to get all these student loans and then to sort of also be psychologically and like racially abused, and denigrated in these predominantly white spaces. So
and I just thought of this too, because I'm a little curious what your perspective is. I know growing up, although I did have some behavioral issues as well, going through public school, and some would say label badass, or like, just, be doing the most. But my mother, she played a big role in kind of enabling that behavior, you know? I kind of want to get your perspective because I noticed that a lot of parents will kind of covertly excuse their children's behavior. And although, you know, everything is, you know, stemmed from learn from the home. So it's probably the apple probably not falling far from the tree. It's also like, why aren't these kids getting the discipline that they need? You know, why do you feel like some of these parents are sending their children off to school without doing the real work of disciplining and teaching their kids, you know, just basic manners and things of that nature?
I think because discipline has negative connotations and it gets a bad rap, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, not that you're doing this, but we can't really predetermine or do a lot of speculation in terms of what the average Black parents' home life is like, how they grew up, or, you know, their current situation. But what I will say is, in the school communities, I see that a lot of, you know, these black parents have been sort of separated and pushed out, disrespected by teachers and principals, right? As if their experience and what they want for their children in school doesn't really matter. So they already feel violated, right? Mm-hmm. Secondly, it's like, if I know you're not doing right by my child, you really kind of don't, we got some issues going on. I'm going to be more likely to believe my child versus what's happening in the school, because I most likely probably went to a school like yours or had a negative experience with the school that my child is in. And first of all, you're trying to come for my kid, right? And then second of all, by criticizing my child, you're actually criticizing me. And I have my own life experience in relationship to discipline, be it in school, criminal justice system, or whatever. So I think that there are a lot of factors that may play into that. And honestly, listen, parents need to be able to trust the people who are with their children all the hours of the day. Like, all of these things have to be corrected and work in tandem. I have fallen into, you know, sometimes being like, damn, this family over here, or this parent, you know, this household, it seems like they haven't really been disciplining their kids or whatever. But I may see that on the outside without understanding the root causes of it. How did this parent grow up? You know what I'm saying? Was the parent ever given the proper tools to actually be a parent and resources to actually support them in parenting? Maybe they're just doing the same thing that they saw their parents do or their guardians or caretakers do. So I think that there's so much that goes into that, but I think it's something for us to consider. What I would urge our people not to do is to not condemn or overly speculate about what's going on with the Black parent. If we see there's a gap in parenting, or that they could use some support, some tools, some resources, it takes a village. It takes a village to raise a child, you know, and to support, you know, Black families and parenting, if those parents are open to the feedback. Yeah. I think that what we get to do as a community, though, is we need to make a distinction between discipline versus correction, right? Discipline goes back to what I said. There's this negative connotation, like, oh, you going with me, take something, like withhold a privilege from me, right, or isolate me. That is discipline. And discipline oftentimes involves guilt, shame, blame, you know, and some sort of harsh consequences that sort of, you know, leaves a person feeling empty or broken. Correction is, okay, so-and-so did this. Let's use this as a teaching moment. Or, hey, I don't know, Johnny, I noticed that you said or you did X, Y, and Z. Why did you do that? What made you do that? Okay, well, did you know that when you do this, it actually means or can be perceived this way? A whole line of, you know, a line of talking to the student, but using that behavior as a teaching opportunity, that is correction. And then saying, okay, I noticed that you did that. You made that mistake. Now that you know this, let's try it again, right? Correction versus discipline. I think that historically we've been disciplined, you know what I'm saying? Overly disciplined from and punished and targeted. I think it's time to shift the paradigm in terms of what that means.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Correction is definitely should be the primary uh thing that black parents should be trying to pick up, over discipline. I love that. Um, Now a lot of what we talked about is you touched on this is the prisoner pipeline system. I want to know your personal experience because you went through DC public school systems. Do you know black men or black children, that have been affected by that, who have, gone down that right and ended up in DC prisons or Maryland prisons, prisons in general?
I have. Yeah, listen, most of the time it happens. I've seen it happen a lot to black boys who go through these charter schools and they go to a different state and they're on some predominantly white college campus, and for one reason or another get caught up with the law. Right? Therefore you have like, right, that dispels the myth. Oh, conform, go to and through college. We're going to lift you up out the hood and be your white saviors and send you off somewhere where you ain't never interacted. You don't understand, like, even the dynamics of what white supremacy is or how it functions or operates, and then they get caught up. Right? I've seen that happen more often than a lot of the students that I taught who, sort of, most of them aren't getting caught up like in the streets like that. So I've seen that happen a lot, but sadly, more often than not, I've seen more kids die by gun violence. Girls, female former students, and male former students, and current students as well, like murder, suicides, domestic violence, being at the wrong place at the wrong time, getting shot or whatnot. So I've seen a lot of that. I've lost several. I mean, I can unfortunately count on two hands the number of students that I've lost to violence.
And I actually just was just talking about, I made a video, and shout out to one of my Patreon members. I forgot her name, but she commented on it because the video was talking about black women in fighting and how it's kind of promoted in us as children, and then we're shamed for it later on in life when we've been, something we've been taught to kind of use as a defense mechanism, over, having just basic communication skills. How have you dealt with that in young black girls? Because, a lot of times we just get casted out, we get suspended, ISS, and it's a lot of times things can get worked out. If an adult gets involved soon enough, it won't even have to get to a point of fighting. But what has your experience been like with that?
Well, personally, I mean, I've gotten suspended for fighting in school. I got suspended for fighting in school. My parents had to come up to the school. It was just this whole big thing. But in terms of our young people, there are things that they're bickering over and fighting about that if they had more knowledge of self and love of self, they wouldn't be fighting. A lot of it is colorism. Some of the stuff is colorism, some of the stuff is around materialism, some of the stuff is around class, some of the stuff is around neighborhood beef that's been going on for the damn near since I was a kid. This hood, this block is still beefing with this block. I'm like, damn, they've been beefing for the past 30, 40 years, that they inherit, right? So there are many reasons that cause that, but then also, they're listening to music and watching a bastardized version of Black culture that's being mass projected through the media that is encouraging this sort of behavior, the fighting, the drilling, the this and that, and they're internalizing it. They're acting it out. It is seeping into their subconscious. So even when they think they just listen to music, they dance and they just chilling, it's already in the subconscious. And so again, this is where Dr. Joy DeGruz's work comes in, when that element, when disrespect shows up from a peer, from an adult or whoever, oh, it's time. It's okay. Let's get it in. And so, yeah, it's just a lot. So, but I think that there are certain things that we can teach around Black empowerment for young girls and boys, to really get to the history of, what colorism is, how that functions, how that's a tool of white supremacy, right? class, materialism, and just really teaching them to have pride within themselves. So, you know, one of the things that Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. teaches us is there's only one form of respect. Oh, my brother Five and I had a conversation about this. I see him in the chat. He'll tell y'all in the chat, there's only one form of respect. And that form of respect is self-respect. I have self-respect, therefore no one can disrespect me. Respect cannot be taken away from me, right? And there's things that we don't beg for. We don't beg for love from anyone. We don't beg for apologies, and we don't, what is it? You don't beg for love, apologies, or I think it was like the other one is like forgiveness. I forget. But those are the things. Oh, respect. Sorry, you don't beg for respect from anybody. Don't say, oh, please respect me. You don't beg for anyone to love you, and you don't ever beg for someone to apologize to you. Right? You carry yourself and your God self powerfully and move through the world, respecting yourself. Then, you know, it really repels that energy from you. But then also, you don't open yourself up to being violated by anybody else. You know what I'm saying? And I think that we need to embody that on a personal level, but then also as a race on a racial level. So after somebody does some BS, people out there saying like, oh, you just dragged the sister down the stairs in this gay bar. These white people, they're racist. We demand an apology. We demand respect. We demand X, Y, and Z. It's just like, yeah, you're already coming to the table being disempowered. And I think that like those simple teachings and things like codification, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr.'s work, I'm always flashing up his book, The Compensatory Code. You saw what?
I said, shout out to Neely Fuller, the elder. Go ahead.
Right, exactly. Both of his books right here. Then, you know, we give them a code in terms of how they can interact with each other and why. Then, you know, it becomes automatic. They practice it, and it eliminates a lot of conflict. So I can run down a whole bunch of stuff that I go through with my my course Unapologetic Black Power over at flynubianpower.com that we talk about on Wednesdays. And the code is about knowing what to do before situations take place or happen, and so that we can eliminate conflict off the bat as Black folks and keep our focus on solving the race problem and producing justice, which is balance between people and guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person who needs help the most gets the most constructive help always. That's justice, right? So, but knowing how to interact in different situations, right? When someone, for young people, what if they learn this? When someone talks about religion, this is what you do. And these are the questions that you ask to shut down a conversation and a potential fight about a person's religion. Or you get into a relationship or you start dating somebody that could, and you find something out about them, you know, listen, I've been there. You know how you want to just kick somebody in the nuts or stab them up or hurt somebody real bad because you find out some stuff like, damn, I didn't know that. You lied to me. Well, there's a whole list of questions in the sex chapter of the compensatory code that Mr. Fuller wrote. Well, you should ask somebody before you get intimate with them or you get into a relationship with them, right? Because it can save you a lot of trauma and drama and stress and conflict and arguments in the long run. You know, what if we taught our children these codes so that they understand that we don't have time to waste time and we are not in a position where we can even afford to be in conflict with each other. Candace Owens can say whatever she wants all day long. One thing about my broadcast on Fly Nubian Queen, y'all will notice that there's certain conversations and things that's petty that I don't even waste my time getting into because it's a time waster, right? And for a troll, for example, like let's say Candace Owens or Jesse Lee Peterson, they're saying some stuff, people get all riled up and then they're spending time on that. But it's kind of like, she said what she said, she doing what she doing, I'm doing what I'm doing, and you doing what you doing. Boom, that's it, move on. There's so many things that we can be teaching our children from a Black empowerment perspective in terms of how to change their thought, speech, and behavior patterns that really, really, absolutely, the VGQ, Mansour, so yeah, the VGQ, the Victims Guarantee Qualification Statement. Everyone's entitled to their own VGQ. But if we teach our children these things, it will eliminate a lot of the conflict and a lot of the fighting because they'll have a code and know how to conduct themselves, and so we can sort of get along and prevent conflict.
Yeah, got to get the kids on code early. on it early. Then it'd be told, and we ain't got to worry about it having that effect later on in life. It is, oh, Lord, that's a blessing though that you said that, because a lot of I hope there's a lot of parents in the chat right now, but a lot of the parents definitely need to get their children on that. The future generations, we got to be correcting these generational curses and traumas for sure, and that's getting the kids on code early is key. Now, also with that, and I'm about to get into this clip actually that I want you to react to that's gone viral, because you deal with a lot of well, let me say this: is when I moved down south at a young age, I dealt with a lot of white kids. You know what I'm saying? It was still a lot of black kids. I lived in a black neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? Everybody on my bus was black. But then, especially when I hit high school, it was predominantly white. It was a predominantly white school, you know. And so there was a lot of microaggressions, anti-black racism, whether it was passive or just blatant, within that school, having to deal with white children. And I want you to react to this really quickly, because this has gone viral of this little white girl coming to her school board about a Black Lives Matter, what are they called? Signs or whatever inside the school. I want your reaction right quick.
Gift. I looked up onto the wall and saw a BLM poster and an Amanda Gorman poster. In case you don't know who that chick is, she's some girl who did a poem at Biden's so-called inauguration. I was so mad. I was told 2 weeks ago at this very meeting spot, no politics in school. I believed what you said at this meeting. So at lunch, I went up to my principal to tell him about the BLM poster and that I wanted it down. He said it's not coming down. I was like, yeah, it is, because the school board said on May 25th, no BLM or politics in school. He said, that's weird. They were the ones who made them. I was stunned. When I was here 2 weeks ago, you told us to report any BLM in our schools. Apparently, you know they're in our schools because you made the signs. I said there should be no BLM in schools, period. It does not matter the color you make the posters and the font you use. We all understand the meaning. It is a political message about getting rid of police officers, rioting, burning buildings down while King Governor Welch just sits on his throne and watches. We all know. Changing the font or the color of posters does not change the meaning. I am 9 years
old. All right, that's enough of that. That's the gist of it, though. What's your reaction to that?
My reaction to that is that the ultimate solution for Black children who have to interact with their peers who are non-Black, who spew anti-Black racist talking points, the solution is to remove our children from those schools, period. The solution is to make sure that our children are protected from those individuals. And honestly, we do our children a great disservice, and we put them in harm's way when they're forced to go to schools that have kids in there like that. So the ultimate solution is for us to build our own schools, send kids to African Center, Black schools. Shout out to the Nation of Islam, Muhammad. What is it? University of Muhammad?
Yeah. I think some of them, but Muhammad, I forget, it's MUI, Muhammad University.
Yes. That's the ultimate solution. So
that's the chat, Dad. Dad know what it is. Type it in the chat, Dad.
That's the ultimate solution to that. Now, in terms of, so that's the ultimate solution. Now, for the Black children who go to that particular school, for example, they need to be empowered enough to counter back and to also give public testimony using the correct codified talking points. My Blackness is not a political statement. This is my identity. This is who I am. They need to be using words like anti-Black warfare. They need to use words like genocide, that we are under genocide. We need to be using words, we're teaching them to use words like state-sanctioned violence and tyranny, apartheid, Black Holocaust, Ma'afa, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is literally, and systemic racism and all of that stuff. There's a whole bunch of vocabulary and ways in which our children need to learn in order to defend themselves against this form of systemic institutional racism, right? And so that, because that little girl is making an argument using white supremacist talking points that she's inherited from the media and from her family and her peers and her social group. So we have to, it is our responsibility, Black parents and educators, aunties, uncles, cousins, elders in the community. It is our responsibility to prepare our children to practice counter war politically, you know, and in every way. So just like that little white girl, she went viral. She's making them proud. They're like, oh yes. So we need to be training up our children and having them also provide public testimony and the right coaching and talking points with facts and all of that good stuff from an early age. Because, you know, at this point, what we need to do is be teaching our children to advocate for themselves and to also compete against these folks, as long as our children especially are subjected to being in their educational spaces, in their neighborhoods, et cetera, which you already know, sis, the ultimate solution is separation.
Of course, separation is key. It's the only solution. Now I will say, there are a lot of Black people. I mean, there's a whole agenda being pushed right now. Are you familiar with critical race theory?
Yes.
Now they're trying to push that in schools right now. How do you feel about that? Because it's not, first of all, when people say critical race theory is always very broad. It's not like, I mean, like you said, they're not being specific with anti-Black racism and white supremacy. And, you know, so how do you feel about that being introduced into schools?
Children need to learn the proper history, the accurate history of this country, right? Which is rooted on anti-Black, indigenous, FBA racism, period. Children need to understand what racism and what white supremacy is from our perspective. The issue that I have with critical race theory is it's defined, it's being taught, it's being projected, and it's sort of normalized, but it's coming out of a Eurocentric lens. And you know that white supremacy takes both sides of the coin.
Right.
Now I do the work of anti-racism within schools, looking at policies and practices and making, you know, finding ways to create anti-racist policies and practices, you know, racially equitable disciplinary policies, you know, retention rates, you know, all of these different things. I think that the dominant society, they have created, it's like they have this, they're going back and forth with each other, right? So you have like the white supremacists on the left and the white supremacists on the right, and they're bickering about what critical race theory is. But at the end of the day, none of it speaks to your point, our situation or our condition, our historic condition and our current condition in this country. And so I think that, like, I'm less concerned about white folks going back and forth about white supremacy. Should it be a secret, an open secret, or should it just be a covert secret? I think that is sort of like where the conversation is going, and us getting caught up in that conversation, either way, I believe is a time waster. We should be working to produce justice. We should be working to make sure that the environments that our children are in schools are anti-racist and racially equitable. That's what we're talking about. And so, and also to our brother, Tariq's point, racism is not a damn theory. It is a fact.
Right.
It's a fact.
Yeah, he did say that.
Yeah, it's a fact. And so when you call something a theory, it's sort of like up in the air. It's like philosophy. It's like, well, here's this idea, right? And ideas and philosophies and things are a bit abstract. No, we got a whole litany of receipts.
Right.
So we're not going to play this word game. And quite frankly, I'm not in the business of trying to work with you to produce justice for me and my folks over here, because our idea of justice and your idea of justice or racism or whatever, you know, it doesn't match, right? Like whatever y'all come up with and whatever you're advocating for is never going to, like, they're not going to consent to giving up power and privilege. And really producing justice. Remember what Mr. Fuller said, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person who needs help the most always gets the most constructive help. Well, that last part, you know, will require for the person who needs help the most to get the most constructive help, that's going to have them be held accountable for getting up off them damn resources, cut that check, You know what I'm saying? If you want to produce justice, then, let me put some zeros and some dollar signs, behind it. You know what I'm saying? You want to give up your $1 million home or your inheritance or your trust fund in order to produce justice? They're not going to do that. And so I don't need to be going back and forth or engage in a conversation about whether racism is real or it's not. If and the anti-critical race theory people, of course, on the right, they're saying that this is all about white hate. So they're using the whole, this is reverse racism argument. And, if we allow this to happen in schools, then this undermines our power and privilege. And we got all these brown people, all these immigrants, all these Black people who are growing in numbers while our numbers are shrinking, will usurp power from us if we allow the upcoming generations to learn about what white supremacy is, or to target white people, or to make white people seem bad and racist. We can't have that. So that's why they're acting a damn fool and they're turning up.
Yeah. And you know what? Because this is also a part of I'm gonna switch it up right quick, because this and I don't know how they was doing it. I know when I was in school, we learned about sex education. I learned it at 5th grade. I think we learned it was like basic stuff, periods, bodies and uterus, stuff like that. Now there's a whole agenda being pushed at this point, and this kind of goes back to even the little Karen, who was talking about Black Lives Matter. And although, I don't rock with Black Lives Matter, that's not our organization. It's really an LGBT organization, So she brings a point, and how they are really pushing an agenda on our children. Now, that's just one small thing, having Black Lives Matter posters up, but it's another thing when they're having drag queens read to children in libraries and after school programs, when they're having videos about masturbation being shown to 2nd and 3rd graders. It's getting like it's pushing grooming, almost to groom them for pedophiles, for pedophilia. So have you noticed this, and what's your opinion on them pushing this agenda on young kids in school?
I find it to be a form of pedophilia. One, I mean, that's just straight up. Like, I think that, and when you look at a child's psychological and brain development, their cognitive development, these conversations are not age appropriate. I'm very careful in terms of how I approach talking about and supporting Black people in general, but also how I'm talking about issues of our LGBT brothers and sisters in our community. Many of them, some folks have endured a level of trauma, sexual trauma, molestation, et cetera, et cetera. I'm the type of person, I'm like, yo, if you Black first, you understand that you're Black first, that your Blackness and us coming together and producing justice against white supremacy, you know what I'm saying, that takes precedent, then we cool. In terms of what's happening in schools, I just think that the European is doing what the European has historically done. Look at the fall of Rome, look at the Roman Empire, look at Greek culture, look at European culture, look at all of these different things. So I don't think that this phenomenon isn't new. I just think that we've gotten to with technology though, right? Sex changes and other agendas at play, right? World depopulation, eugenics, right? Those agendas have become more and more and more sophisticated. So back in Margaret Sanger's day, 100 years ago or so, it was just like, okay, we're going to get these Negroes to get abortions and not reproduce. But now is that in addition to, making sure that the Black family, like that Black families won't be produced, in different ways. And so I think that, and this is why buck breaking is so important, because it shows the historic racism from the white racist LGBT person or community, right? That this has been happening historically. Sex has always been weaponized against us. through rape of Black men, rape of Black women, the taking away the gender of children and Black people on plantations. All of this is a form of warfare.
Yeah.
And what I'm seeing happening in the media, for the most part, and in society, is this level of psychological rape and gaslighting when it comes onto gender and sexuality. And that is a problem. And I find it to be really, really disturbing that there are people who call themselves adults who work with children, social workers, psychologists, educators, etc., who think that it's appropriate to have conversations about sex and sexuality and, anal sex, oral sex, masturbation with kindergartners. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. It's sick.
It's sick. And even many of my Black LGBT brothers and sisters will even admit and say, this is OD. Oh, this is inappropriate. Like, we don't stand for that. So I just think that, like, listen, the agenda is real. The agenda is just so real. And again, it's up to us to stand up and protect our children. That's why we need to be, if we're sending our children into these schools where they're being taught by people who don't look like us, or people who look like us but don't think like us, then we really have to evaluate what we're subjecting our kids to. But if we don't have any other options, then we need to be there, and we need to be as hands-on and all up in the curriculum and all up in these people's faces and making sure, like, oh, nah, we opting out of that. We're not doing that. I don't support that. X, Y, and Z, hell to the nah. Nope. I'm coming to the school board meeting. I'm turning up. The principal, the superintendent, they're going to know me by name, and we're going to organize as Black parents, and we're going to shut this shit down. Period.
And, I'm curious, how old do you think children should be? Or how old, I wouldn't say children, I would say teens. How old do you think students should be when they are introduced to sex education?
I mean, I would say like middle school, like the 8th grade, 7th grade. Unfortunately, children are being programmed and they've been groomed, to your point, to be sexually active.
Yeah.
The music, the TV, the commercials, the this, the that, they need to know how their bodies work and how people are able to reproduce. You know what I'm saying? They need to know what venereal diseases and sexually and transmitted infections are and all of that stuff. They need to understand that. I believe they need to understand that stuff. And I mean, whether we like it or not, sexuality and the spectrum of sexuality and the spectrum of gender is so ingrained right now in media and in society. They also need to be educated in terms of what that is, but not just what that is as an identity. Let's also teach them the origin of these behaviors. Let's teach them the origins of these identities. Let's teach them the origins in terms of, like, rape and, sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, how that plays out. It can play out today in an individual's life, but also how it has played out historically, since the onset of the European and our interaction with them. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about sex as warfare. How about we do that as well, right? So if you want to teach folks about, the different, ways that folks choose to identify themselves, then let's dig deeper. And, I'm really excited and really honored to have been, participated and contributed to the Buck-Breaking Project, because many of our people just don't know.
Yeah. You'd be surprised. I've mentioned it to several Black people, just like, casually, like, I went to the Buck-Breaking Project. What is buck-breaking? What are you talking about? It's very sad, to see that that's something that's been very detrimental, and especially our men and the masculinity in our men. And they have no clue about it. They have no clue, especially in how it works in different ways, just like how we went through, through the public school system, even with them being tamed and, other things of that nature. They're not aware. A lot of our parents, a lot of grown-ass people aren't aware of what's been going on, what's happened to us in the past. And that is vital to knowing what the hell is going on right now.
Oh, I just wanted to add, sis, when we were at the buck breaking screening in PG County, right, with Brother Risa, what was that, last month? Right? There was a LGBT brother, you know, who spoke, and I think he spoke after him, but he was just overwhelmed because he was like, I mean, I didn't know this stuff. And he was literally in there in a kilt, like in a skirt, but he was also helping, you know, the event organizers to like sort of take tickets, get people seated. You know, he was a part of, you know, and he seemed to be very, very overwhelmed at the end of the screening saying, I did not know all of this stuff. And then also he had his own story as well. And so that's why I say, like, we get to be really, really mindful. And I try to take the route on this topic as our brother Risa Islam does, you know, very, very gracefully, very, very fairly. But to your point, many of our brothers and sisters just don't know.
Yeah. And do you think that, or how do you think Black parents should be going about teaching their kids, not only just, the histories of LGBT and, you know, things of that nature, but also just preparing them to come to school? Because, I mean, with the past, in the past year or so, you know, with the pandemic that's been going on, a lot of Black families have been kind of forced to be more involved in their children's schooling because they had to be home. You know, they had to be on their laptops. They had to be like, Mommy, I don't understand this. The computer's glitching. I need help, or something like that. So they've kind of been forced to be more involved. How do you think Black parents should move forward, and even you know, the following school years? Because I know some schools may not even go back to. May stay virtual. Some schools are given an option of staying virtual or having your kids go back. So how do you think Black parents should be preparing themselves and their children to go back into schools?
If I had a magic wand, Black parents would even send their kids back to those schools. Like, right? Like, if we could get some resources and some homeschooling co-ops and things together, that would be ideal. But in terms of that, I think that there has to be some real hard conversations that take place in the Black households in terms of identity. This is our family. This is who we are. This is our legacy. This is what we represent. These are our morals. These are our values. These are our non-negotiables. And so if anyone violates any of these boundaries, then you need to tell me. And if they do this, you need to be prepared to do that. This is how you respond with that. And, you know, so it needs to be that. I think that children need to be empowered to speak out against injustices. I think a big part of the problem is children go to schools, they're demoralized, or they experience microaggressions from a teacher or another student, but they're so ashamed or pissed off or triggered, they oftentimes don't even come home and tell the parent. And so we have to have that level of relationship with our children so that they feel comfortable talking to us when they have questions or if they are being harmed. That's a good way to prepare them to return back into the schools. And in terms of, I think the hardest part is the rules and discipline and the control, right? School environment. So if you're at home and you on Zoom and you're in a pretty casual situation for a year, going back into an institution where you have to walk in a line, or you'll get in trouble for doing this, or get in trouble or sent out for doing that, for breaking these rules, you know, that is going to be an adjustment. And this is up to us as Black educators and parents to make sure that they're not being too hard on our children in terms of discipline and these policies. They need to be, they need to adapt to where children are right now, what they've been dealing with, because quite frankly, we got a lot of our children who are far more responsible than most of the adults, if not all of the adults in their household. We literally have children who are, or young people who are, they have a lot of responsibilities around the house, in their communities, etc. And so for them to go from that environment for over a year to going back into a classroom where they're treated and subjected to harsh or unfair treatment, being controlled, always being threatened with the consequence, that's going to create a problem. And so the third thing that needs to happen is parents need to make their presence known to these teachers and these principals from jump. Pop up at the school on your lunch break. take a day off or a couple hours off and pop up at the school. If enough Black parents start doing this just to do a walkthrough, just to be present, then the schools, the teachers and stuff, they're going to think twice, or they're going to think 3 times before taking out their unconscious biases or whatever onto your Black child. So we got to be present, and we got to make our presence known within these schools, and then look at the policies, ask questions, and advocate and raise hell if you see something you don't like. Yeah. We pay their salaries.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. That was a great way to wrap that up. That's a blessing. Hold up. And you know what? I want to get into, I have 2 Patreon questions, actually, peacefully rounded. Shout out to that super chat, peacefully rounded. And Jazz J, but I have 2 questions for you from Patreon. Let me see. Okay, so the first sister says, give me 1 second. All right, Jazz J, you gave me a mouthful, but I'm gonna read all this doing for you just because you typed all this out. Okay. I used to teach kindergarten 1 year. That was my favorite year because I got to mold and teach them how to become strong and love themselves. And 3 to 4. Grades 3 to 4, I love that year too. Grades 3 to 4. Okay. And I love that year too. I had nothing but Black children. I love teaching, but these schools see different when you are a Black woman or man and speak to them as you are putting them in check, because some Black kids like to try you and then they start loving you because no one cared enough to do that or taught them different than what they wanted you to treat them. As that's when they want you to let them go. They want you to let them go. Jazz, you kind of messed this message up. You should have read this. You got me up here looking stupid. When they want to let you go or make it hard for you. I'm so sorry. LOL, I just had to put my 2 cents in because this is the school. This school shit is serious. Question: how do you stay true to yourself while teaching children without anyone saying anything about how you are teaching them?
Yeah. So one of my favorite things to do is I let people know when it comes on to certain things, you're not qualified to critique me or criticize me. And I say the same thing about other folks too. Like, they'll be like, what do you think about so-and-so? I'm not qualified. You know what I'm saying? I have not had their level of experience or whatever to even give a comment, in good conscience. Let me just keep it real, right? So basically the moral of the story is stay in your lane. Right. So when it comes on to how I interact with Black children, I am, we share the same culture, we share the same values, and we're speaking a completely different language that you don't understand, you don't get to understand, you actually don't get to critique. Our relationship building and me seeing and interacting with, a child that shares my culture and a family that shares my culture is not something that you are a part of. It's not something that can be assessed on a rubric or end of the year evaluation or whatever. And it's quite frankly, it's non-negotiable, right? But on the flip side, let's talk about how culturally responsive you are. Let me just point out to you how well you don't actually understand the nuances of our culture or the needs of the child. All right. Have a nice day. That's it. Like it requires showing up in a very consistent way that's unapologetic, but then also understanding how to call out stuff. For example, if a white teacher wants to critique your performance or critique a relationship that you have with a family or with a student, you can ask a series of questions and that lead a certain way, but you can also make statements like, I'm experiencing your critique of my relationship with this child. I'm experiencing that as a form of anti-Black racism. I'm experiencing that as white paternalism, white fragility, or whatever else you're in. And I'm also here to make it known that I am not a child, and you actually don't get to dominate me or control, micromanage, et cetera, my interactions with students. The end result is, the child's behavior has improved. Their test scores have improved. They're coming to school more than they used to, or whatever. They feel empowered. They're improving, etc. Always point to the data as well, and your impact or, on the student's life and their learning. But then also let these people know, you actually don't have the right to just walk into my classroom. you actually don't have the right to give me unsolicited feedback in terms of what you think I should be doing or how I should be operating as a Black educator. And you have to name race when you're having these conversations or sending these emails and checking these people. As a Black teacher, I experienced your X, Y, and Z as a anti-Black microaggression or form of unconscious bias because of X, Y, and Z. The impact that it has on me as a Black educator is X, Y, and Z. Next time, I will not tolerate you doing whatever, period. So I also train, educators and people in terms of like how to navigate and really call out the racism that exists in a lot of different scenarios. I hope that answers the question.
All right, I think so. I should have responded in a second, but yes, that's a blessing. And then let me see. This is your second question. Okay. This is a little off topic, but after being involved in events like FBA, I like the FBA convention, which by the way I had great feedback. And the one done a couple years ago, I believe the Black Agendas event. What do you believe was the biggest takeaway? Yeah, that's all.
The biggest takeaway is that when codified Black people come together, we can move mountains. The biggest takeaway is that when we are intentionally gathering with a constructive purpose, which is to produce justice, create new resources and opportunities and empowerment for ourselves, there's nothing that we can't do. Those are my biggest takeaways from that. And then also my biggest takeaways from those sorts of events is just noticing, it just feels good just seeing, Black folks who are on code and who are committed to long-term solutions and nation building. That is, it's very, very reassuring, especially like within the work that, I do. I do a lot of work in a lot of different spaces with a lot of different people. So it's always good when we come together, in these sort of think tanks to really think about, strategizing and doing things that are going to empower us and safeguard us and help us attain a level of Black liberation.
Yes, that's a fact. That's why I love going to Black events. I met you for the first time at the Foundation of Black American Conference. That was a blessing. Yeah, it was great. That was a great event. Yeah, it was a bunch of Black friends. I bought a bunch of shit. Oh my God, I spent like $200-$300 out there on them damn events.
Oh wow!
Oh my God! Yeah, it was a lot. I bought a lot of stuff out there. I met Risen for the first time out there too. It was a blessing. But yeah, I love going to. It's so empowering. Feels so empowering being around Black people who, on code, and who are reaching and striving for the same things you are for our community. It's a blessing. But Sister Jade, this has been a blessing. You have dropped so many gems. I thank you so much for coming on here. It's a blessing.
Absolutely. So. Thank you for having me on. I'm inviting you to come into the Lioness Den anytime you want, sis. So feel free to come over, flynubianqueentv.com. I'm on weekdays normally at 12 p.m. Eastern time. I will be on tomorrow. Tequila is getting checked. Did you hear her video? She did a TikTok video talking about why God made Black women bald-headed.
What?
Oh, yes, ma'am. We're going to talk about that. If you want to join me tomorrow, you're more than welcome.
Oh, heard. Okay. Hashtag anti-Black racism. Stop anti-Black racism. Anti-Asian racism. To anti-Black Asian racism. Look, I'm getting the whole fucking word messed up. Anti-Black racism towards anti-Asian, anti-Black racism towards Black people from Asians. Talk about the damn anti-Asian racism. Get the hell out of here.
So we can handle that tomorrow, and you're welcome to come into the Lioness Den anytime. I love the work that you do. The other thing is, I want to invite you to come to my course, Unapologetic Black Power, as a guest speaker or as a special guest. So we'll set that up.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm with it. It's like is it an event? It's here in DC?
Oh, it's virtual. So we meet on Wednesdays.
Okay, now I'll definitely come through. Definitely. Let me know. The time in the stream, whatever we're doing. I got you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
No problem. Do you have anything you want to promote before you leave?
Yeah, I would love for folks to go over to flynubianpower.com. That's flynubianpower.com. Sign up for the course, Unapologetic Black Power with Lioness Crown. Also, if you have the heart of a lion or a lioness and you're on code and you Black first, you're welcome to come over into the Lioness Den with us. We're there, like I said, weekdays at 12 p.m. Eastern time. We hit on a variety of topics that are constructive, solution-oriented, and that focus on really, just Black empowerment. So come over on FlyNubianQueenTV.com. That's the YouTube channel. Also, you can hit me up on IG. I'm at Lioness Crowned on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. And I'm on Clubhouse, but I don't even try to be on that app as much. We can, that's a whole nother story. But y'all can find me on Clubhouse as well when I do make an appearance occasionally.
Yeah, and make sure you show some love to her Cash App. I got it going across the screen. I make sure y'all show some love to the sister Cash App. She deserves it. It's a blessing. But yeah, sis, I appreciate you so much, and I gotta bring you back on sometime. We're gonna do this again for sure, and I definitely come to your platform. That's no problem.
Absolutely. Thank you, sis. And I'll see you around the DMV. Let's also get together.
Yeah, let's link. Yeah, because I thought you told me when I met you. I thought you. When I seen you at the premiere, I thought you was insinuating that you lived in Brooklyn. So I was like, oh shit, damn, she ain't going. But now if you here, we definitely got a link. Like for real, ASAP. You got my number. We got a link.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much.
No problem, Shell. You have a wonderful rest of your night. Thank you again.
All right. Peace.
Peace. All right, y'all. I hope y'all enjoyed the conversation. It's lit. Shout out to everybody in the chat that came through. Shout out to all the super chats. There was a couple I couldn't get to. But I appreciate y'all. I know on my last live I promoted this too, but make sure y'all follow Juju Nails. All the ladies in the chat. Oh men, hey, look, I'm not just make sure you follow Juju Nails on the go on Instagram for a chance to win a free set of press-on nails. Black-owned business, we doing black-owned only. Get out them damn Asian stores, okay? Get out them damn Asian stores. They ain't supporting us. They never have. And then they on this bullshit anti-Asian hate crime. We not doing that. So get out the Asian stores, support black-owned, get some free press-ons, follow the girl. Other than that, make sure you follow me on Instagram, __CFWM. Hit me on Twitter. Shata_you. Get me on. Make sure you subscribe, turn on the notifications bell, and share this stream. Please share it on Twitter, Facebook, all that jazz. All right, y'all. Shout out to everybody in the chat. 5 Jazz. Mo, where you been at? Shout out to my daddy. He was in the chat the whole time. My sister, Mansoor, Sean, everybody. I appreciate y'all. I'll be back. I don't know. It's only 10:30. I might mess around and get back on live. I usually go live at 11. I don't know if I feel like it, but if not, I'll be back on tomorrow. All right, y'all.